Okay, today's topic is ideal country property. Finding the ideal country property, what to look for, how to find it, and then we're going to have a tour of a country property that was made by a gentleman who wrote the book, The Country Way. So I think you'll enjoy this. And you know, even if you're already in the country, you don't know if the Lord's going to want you to move again. I think I told some of you about how we really like where we are, and we worked hard to get where we are, and we've been there 10 years, and we finally got everything kind of set up the way we wanted it in terms of alternative things. But during COVID, our daughter, who lives next door, and us both felt like God was prompting us to move. And did I tell you that yesterday? So, you know, when we went through the exercise of proving we were willing, then he said, you don't have to go. So, but my point is that, you know, even if you are already in the country, you may at some point want to relocate to some better situation. And so you can pick up things. I went to the Meissner's Sustainable Preparedness Seminar, the very first one that got us coming back into the country. I went to 5 of those seminars, and they're all identical. They don't change anything. I'm changing my stuff all the time. But you'll always learn something. You know, it's like when you read the Bible and you read a verse, you go, I never saw that before, and you've read it how many times? So, you know, even if you're in the country, I'm confident you'll learn some things that will be helpful to you or helpful to help someone else who maybe is trying to move to the country. Okay, so what to look for in country property. Now, I'm not sure where I am in the sequence here. Let me just see. Yep, here we go. Okay, so I went on the internet and I found 2 couples who moved into the country. The first couple moved in the southeastern United States. I want to say Georgia, Alabama, somewhere down there. And I think they're Adventists. There wasn't enough telltale to prove it, but I think they're Adventists. And they've been in the country for 10 years. And they've moved a couple of times in the process, maybe 3. And the thing that I want you to, this light's purple, isn't it? On here? Okay, that means it's recording. Okay. The thing that I think is important to notice is that they are, thank you, he turned the ceiling fan on. They're renting. They've been in the country for 10 years and they still don't own property. So for those of you who say, well, I'm a renter and I can't afford to do all this buying stuff, you don't have to. Like I said yesterday, think about your situation and think laterally. Like if you're renting, look to rent in the country. If you own, look to own in the country. God's not telling you have to own. He's just telling you to get out of Dodge. So the significance of this first couple is they have lived in the country for 10 years and they've never owned yet. The next couple I'm going to show you own and have been for 10 years. And both of them are going to give you tips from their journey of what to look for in country property.
Thinking about moving to the country?
Maybe you don't know where to look or what to look for.
We decided 10 years ago that we were going to move out of the cities. And in this video, we're going to share with you 7 key elements to look for to help you in your search for your country property.
Going to want to look for is an independent water source. This can come in a variety of ways. A spring, a well, a creek, a pond, maybe even a lake.
The second thing we look for in a country property is if it has a stand of trees. This is important to us because a nice stand of trees can provide a number of different things. 1, a heat source. 2, privacy. And 3, even a possible means of income.
Third on our list is a place to grow your food. You're going to want to have a great garden spot and orchard.
This is a must-have. Just think, if you can grow your own food, the quality is going to be better. The taste, unbelievable. And you don't have to depend on the store for your food.
No.
Number 4 on the list is privacy. You might think, oh, you're out in the country, privacy is a given, but that's not always the case. Here's an example. We've lived on 3 acres where a house was set back from the road. We were surrounded by a buffer of hundreds of acres of cow pasture and trees versus a 100-acre property that we lived on, and the house was 50 feet from the road. Not so private.
I'm really excited about point 5, and that is a strategic location. We have this book, it's one of our favorite books written by Joel Skousen. It's called Strategic Relocation. And it's very important that you do find a strategic location when you are considering where you're going to be finding a country home. And he covers everything you can imagine in this book. Some of the considerations that you might have for a particular state are, what are the homeschooling laws like? Does that state respect constitutional rights? What are the natural disasters in that area? What's the climate in that area? How high is the crime? What's the population density? There are so many factors in this book that are considered. I highly recommend the book, but it is important that you do choose a strategic location.
Number 6 is the potential that the property has for alternative energy. If you're not familiar with what those are, most commonly, wind energy, solar, and microhydro. So depending on the layout of the land, one could be better for you than another. So this is something that you're going to want to look into when you're observing a property.
The 7th thing that you're going to want to consider in finding your country property is the accessibility. Now, when you are considering accessibility, there's actually going to be different preferences for different people. Some people are going to want it to be as accessible as possible. Some people are going to want it to be very difficult to get into.
So some things that come to mind. Springtime or the rainy season in most locations, mud could be horrible and make it very hard to get in and out of your property. Wintertime, if you live in an area north, snow might be an issue. Also, depending on where you live, flooding could be an issue in the winter or spring months.
Another thing that you want to consider when talking about accessibility is, what access do people have to your property, and are you having to access through somebody else's property to get to your property?
Okay, so that couple was renting. You'll notice they talked about, we used to live on one that had so many acres, then we were on another one. That's because they were renting. Now this couple, they're Adventists. They went to Southern. He became a dentist, and they moved to Hawaii to be off-grid. And both of these couples, like, you can get on their channel and you can watch their journey as they make progress over these years, 10 years. What happened with the ones in Hawaii is they found this property and they were developing it and building. I think they'd already built a house. And then a volcanic eruption happened, and the lava covered that whole part of how to get there. There was no power, there was no access, nothing. And I'm assuming they just walked away. And so now this is now later, they've now found another property, and they're telling their tips for looking for country property. Oh, we got
In this discussion, we're going to be drawing from our own experience living off-grid in Hawaii for the past 10 years.
So one of the first things we considered is population density.
Population density is a measure of how many people live in a particular area. So it's measured in people per square mile. Typically, some parts of every state are very populated and other parts are not. So in the state of Hawaii, for example, in Oahu, the island of Oahu, there are over 1,600 people per square mile, and that is the population density. On this island, the island of Hawaii, the Big Island, this island has a population density that's currently 45 people per square mile. So another thing to consider is distance from the city. Here on this island, we're fortunate not to have any major cities. The nearest one would be several islands away, approximately 210 miles. However, on this island, we do have some small cities in the neighborhood of approximately 45,000 people. And so in the past, living on this island, we have lived as far as an hour away from the city, or the small city. However, more recently, we were looking at a minimum of 10 miles outside of this town or city. And we ended up settling on a place approximately half an hour away. So we wanted enough distance for city expansion over time, as well as for us to be able to commute to work, get needed groceries and supplies during the development phase, etc.
Yeah.
I would say when considering a country property, that probably the home itself is probably one of the last things that one should consider. In other words, if you find a property and it looks like the property is actually not great, but the home is great, I would consider look elsewhere, because country living is a lot more than just country location. It is about independence, it's about reliance upon oneself and God, and there's a lot that goes into that. There's agriculture, there's generation of your own power, there's access to water, so there are many considerations. The first thing that we really looked at was property suitability for agriculture.
Yes.
So thinking ahead, we know that that is perhaps paramount, right?
Privacy.
Yeah, so from the counsels that we've been given, as well as our own experience, as well as common sense, if you look around at the world today, privacy is very important, and it's becoming more and more important all the time. And so ideally you want to get a piece of property that will give you enough space, and if it doesn't have built-in privacy, you can always try to figure out some privacy that you can put in place.
Decent road access.
The access to your property, whether that be county roads or whether that be private roads, whatever it is, you've got to make sure that it's going to be suitable for your needs. Yeah. And everybody's needs may be a little different if people have access to different kinds of vehicles, etc. But you've just got to really consider. So the next thing we looked at was sunshine. And sunshine is really important for a lot of reasons. You want to purchase a place where cloud cover is not dominant, where you have access to sunshine for as much of the year as possible. And you need that for a couple of reasons. Number one, for independent power generation, which would mean solar power panels. And also
food production.
Also for food production. So you're going to have some agriculture, you're going to have trees, you're going to be growing gardens, and those are really going to rely upon the sun for food production. And so your food production and your power production could be significantly less if you happen to not have enough sun in your location.
Yes, and another important point is you want to consider your mental health, because without sunshine, most people feel very gloomy, and it's not a good environment to live in. So for us, it was very important, especially I'm a stay-at-home mom and I stay at home most of the time with my kids. I wanted to be able to be most of the time in the sunshine and be happy most of the time, right?
Here in Hawaii, as you move away from the ocean, up the slopes of the mountains, typically the higher up you go, the less sunshine you have, the more cloud cover you have. And so for us, that meant the need to stay closer toward the ocean for the sunshine, for the lower elevation, which enables us to grow more crops, etc.
Yeah, it's really a fine balance to try to be not too close to the ocean, not too close to the highway, yet to be not too far away that you're just living in the clouds.
The next point is rainfall. Rainfall is key. It's absolutely key. You're relying upon this to pretty much grow whatever it is you need to grow, in addition to beautify and keep nature all green around you.
Let's see, the next thing is breezes, trade winds, and airflow.
So airflow is really important, and one of the ways that you can accomplish that, of course, is to make sure that the area around your home site is cleared enough that the breezes can come in, right? And in the absence of these winds or breezes, you're going to have mold problems, especially in high humidity areas like Hawaii.
Now let's talk about homeowner associations.
So our opinion on homeowners associations is to avoid them, really. So what they are is these are local groups, community groups, neighborhood associations that essentially want to be involved in all of your decisions that you make related to your property.
Let's see, phone and internet access. Those are important things.
Yeah, so you probably want to consider when you're looking at your property, what kind of access do you have to phone and internet? You might have a cell signal, and that might be a blessing, as long as, of course, the cell tower is not right next door to you. But do you have access to what you need as far as phone and internet, whether that be landline or otherwise? Ideally, you want to live in an area where you're not the only person who's independent for the necessities of life. In other words, you don't want to be the only person who has large gardens and orchards. So if you can see that your neighbors are also have built some resiliency into their lives, they have some agriculture going on, etc., that's a real plus.
Because when the crisis comes, and you're the only one who has food, guess where everybody's gonna go?
Yeah, and so we're always happy to share, but you don't want your own supplies to be wiped out by thieves.
Right, I mean, it's all about safety too.
We're also going to avoid land needing expensive improvements. At least you're going to want to really know about that and do your due diligence as to what it's going to cost before you sign on the dotted line.
Landlocked. What does that mean?
So you want to just make sure that you have legal access to the property. And so if your property is not bordering a county road or something like that, do you actually have legal access to get there?
Another thing is to avoid natural hazard zones.
Right, so the most common application of this would be flood zones. You're going to want to look at the FEMA flood site and look at their maps and see, is the area you're considering purchasing, is it at risk of flooding? So country living is really about many things, but one aspect of it is providing for the necessities of life, providing for our family. And so thinking ahead to a time when there will be no buying or selling for those who are faithful to God and keep His commandments.
Yes.
And so it's important that we realize what are some of the basic necessities of life. This is about water, food, shelter and warmth, and also personal safety. And so we want to make sure that when we're selecting a country property, that we can take care of these necessities of life on that property and that we have a plan on how to do that.
Okay, again, on my website, preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com, it organizes our 400, I've said 430, but actually it's 424 videos having to do with country living, end time prophecy, things like that. And the handouts categorize things, which videos match what we're talking about that day. I apologize, we're out of the books and we're out of day 2 handouts and yesterday's handouts. So I guess we made the right amount. But anyway, at the back of the book, when I had the book in manuscript form, this book, if you're visiting and hadn't been here before, I sent it to a person who wrote the recommendation on the top back of the book. He's in Arizona, and when he read the book, he said, what you ought to do is add in the back a list of things to look for and to consider in country property. So if you have the book, if you look in the back, I've made like about 6 or 8 pages of those things. And how important are they? Are they important? Are they things to avoid? Like when we were looking for our country property that we're on right now, we wanted to make sure there weren't high tension power lines going through the property. We wanted to make sure there wasn't a railroad that's going to blow a horn in the middle of the night, which is pretty hard to do in some areas because like northern Idaho and BC, the train goes right where the population is. And so sometimes you just have to compromise. But anyway, so that list is there, and it's a handy thing to have. I don't have it as a handout, but it is in the book if you bought the book. So here's all these things. For instance, electrical power. How important is that? Well, if you want to be off grid, then you don't care about the power, and so you can be further out and save the money. Like it could cost you, say, $15,000 to bring power in per power pole. So if you're looking remotely and you need to bring power in, it costs a lot of money to pay the power company to bring that to your property. You could invest that in being off grid, is what a lot of people think to do that are trying to be off grid. So how important it is, it depends on whether you want to be off grid or not. South facing, I'm just picking some on the sheet here. South facing, that's really important because you need it for gardening and you need it for solar electrical generation. My brother lives in northeast Washington, and people will come there. A lot of country living minded Adventist people, or non-Adventists for that matter, will come there in the summer with the idea of getting out of the city. And I'm going to try to do this so it won't rain so much. And so they come in the summer and they find this really nice piece of property and they buy it, and they don't think about the fact that it's not facing south. So in the winter, they can't get in there very easily because the snow is on the road and it doesn't melt. And then they can't do solar because they're facing the wrong direction, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, south facing is really important. Let me just grab another one. They talked about HOAs, covenants, same kind of thing. Let's see. Water rights. I'll just grab that one. If you have a creek on the property, it'd be really nice to be able to do whatever you want with the creek. And in BC, you might have that option. In some other areas, more restrictive. So you need to do some research. Anyway, there's the list. Now, what I want to do is show you a video tour of this home. This Lloyd Amy and his wife, Mary Margaret, were teachers at PUC in the late 70s through late 80s. And he taught biology. And they had a requirement for all students to take a biology course, and the course that they were taking was designed for biology majors. So Dr. Amy went to the committee and he said, you know, we really need a course that's designed for people that are not biology majors. And they said, like what? And that was kind of the tail end of the hippie era where people are living off the land and all that. And he said, why don't we do one on country living? And they said, great, you do it. So now he was stuck with developing a course for country living. So he scoured all over trying to find a textbook and couldn't find one. So Southern Publishing told him, if you write the book, we'll publish it. So he wrote the book and used it as a textbook, and it was called The Country Way. And I'll tell you a little backstory here. It's kind of interesting. When we were looking for property, we found this property that we currently live on. It was bare timberland, and the for sale sign was an old weather-beaten sign, been there for a long time. And we were negotiating, trying to buy it, figure out how we could afford to do this thing. And in the meantime, one of the things I'm going to show you is how you can spy on the neighbors and see who owns the properties and all that kind of stuff. Well, in the process of doing that, I found on the county records Washington Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I go, hey, we have an Adventist that lives on this road. And so I was eager to go meet these people. And but we didn't want anybody in the neighborhood to know that we were interested in buying this property, because what if a neighbor says, well, I always wanted to own that property, and now you've got a bidding war and it gets out of hand. So we were being really tight-lipped about making an offer on this property. We hadn't even made the offer. So we didn't go and meet these people, but we knew from the county records they were Adventists. And it happened to be Lloyd and Mary Margaret Amy, this house here. And so when the offer was accepted, we were in Arizona. So the guy calls us up and says, well, if you want the property, I'll sell it to you. So my son-in-law and I flew up from Arizona, and we went to the property. We actually camped in a tent along the creek. And then on Sabbath, we went to Kirkland, which was about an hour and a half away, where his sister lives. She's here at camp meeting too. And so we're at the Kirkland church because his sister's there, and we're going to have lunch and everything. So we're in the lobby, and they have this counter, a welcome counter, and this lady behind the counter is welcoming us. And she says, oh, what's your name? And when she came to me, well, you got to spell my first and last name, right? Well, I was scheduled to do camp meeting with a seminar like this, and the booklet was sitting right in front of me. So instead of telling her who I was, I just turned to the page and turned it around. I said, that's me. And she said, oh, country living. My uncle wrote a book about country living. And she said to my son-in-law, are you looking for land in Kirkland? No, that's a big city. No, we're up in Skagit County. And she says, well, my uncle lives in Skagit County. Where does he live? And Steve says the name of the road. And she says, yeah, that's where it is. And I go, That's the guy, that's the family, those are the Adventists. I'm thinking, wait a minute. He wrote the book, The Country Way. She told us about the book. That's the first time I found out about it. In church, I'm looking it up to see where where it's available. And I thought, wait a minute. If I go to camp meeting and I'm presenting my class, he could be sitting in the front row. I wouldn't even know what he looks like. I've got to find out so I don't embarrass him. So I didn't want to go and tell him that we were looking at this property and had an offer and everything. So I called him up out of the blue, didn't say where I was. And I said, I just wanted to let you know I'm doing a class on country living and camp meeting, and I'm going to promote your book. Are you going to be at camp meeting? And he says, no, we're elderly. We don't go to camp meeting anymore. And I go, so anyway, that was the beginning of getting acquainted with these people, and we got really good friends. Our grandkids called them Grandpa and Grandma, and even though I'm Grandpa, thank you very much. So, but anyway, he passed away, and then she moved into a facility, and I was always telling them through the years, I said, look, you have built your house following the principles in your book. It's a perfect place for an Adventist wanting to move out of the city to have a turnkey, ready to go property. And I said, let me try to sell your house. I want to make sure. I don't want somebody from California coming in, knocking down the cedar trees and putting in a riding arena. We gotta find the right people. So I made this video and I sent it to everybody I knew, including the people on our email list and stuff. And some people came and looked and everything, and I thought, I'm gonna find the right person. Well, and we even had an Adventist realtor. The people that bought it are not Adventists, they're not country living, they're a nice family with 2 kids. It'll be fine. But that was an opportunity that I really thought I could help them with. So here's the video tour of this property. I'm going to switch mics here again. This is a video tour. This is some country property owned by Lloyd and Mary Margaret Amy, who she is in a facility, retired, and he's passed away. The Lloyd and Mary Margaret were instructors at Pacific Union College during their career, and this was their retirement home, which they developed from bare land. We are at the end of a 2-mile-long county road. At the time they moved here and bought the property, it wasn't paved, but you can see the end of the paved road in this view. We will now proceed to their driveway. This is the entry to the property off the county road. You will see it's a nice wooded 10 acres with ferns on either side of the driveway, making it very nice. The adjoining wooded area on either side is a tall stand of cedar trees. It's very beautiful. This is the home. It's a 2,000 square foot, 2-story home. Real quality built home, built in 1989. The 2.5 car garage is a 1,300 square foot. Plus there's a little wood shop in the back, a 3/4 bathroom, and a wood shed inside and outside in the garage area. We will proceed to tour the outside of the property and then go inside. It's nicely landscaped. All of what you see here are rhododendrons and azaleas, which are beautiful colored plants during the year. They're evergreen. The rest of the year, you can see in the distance, there's a beautiful, apparently a cherry tree that's in bloom. There's a fenced orchard with about a dozen fruit trees.
The framed area is blueberries. There are, as I recall, also seedless blackberries, and we will show you grapes in a minute. But here's the rest of the front area of the property. When Lloyd and Mary Margaret first bought this property, they had to whack their way in through the thick woods to get here. And then over the years, as they'd come up in the summers from working at PUC, they would clear this land and live in a tent. And then they would go on hiking expeditions and such, backpacking. Over the years, they built this cabin. The lumber was built from trees knocked down here on the property, and Lloyd cut up the lumber with a Alaska chainsaw sawmill. They lived in this two-room cabin when they would come up for the summers. It had a wood stove in the main room and a kitchen, and then they had a bedroom with a bathroom. And the bathroom even had a, because it was off-grid and no running water, they would haul water from a spring quite a distance away, but in a pail. And then they had a shower with a 5-gallon bucket with a rope and a pulley with holes in the bottom. They'd fill the warm water in the bucket and then lift the bucket and have a shower. The property has a nice orchard of about a dozen fruit trees of varieties and some grapes, and I understand seedless blackberries as well. These appear to be grapes. I recall they were Concord grapes, I believe, on this fence. In one corner of the orchard is a blueberry patch with about a half a dozen blueberry bushes matured. They're very productive. There's a frame around it with which allows for netting when the berries are ripe to keep the birds from taking them. Sauk Mountain is in the distance. And here's the rhododendrons and azaleas on the... This is a video tour of some country property owned by Lloyd and Mary Margaret Amy, who she is in a facility, retired, and he's passed away. The Lloyd and Mary Margaret were instructors at Pacific Union College during their career, and this was their retirement home, which they developed from bare land. We are at the end of a 2-mile-long county road. At the time they moved here and bought the property, it wasn't paved, but you can see the end of the paved road in this view. We will now proceed to their drive. This is the entry to the property off the county road. You will see it's a nice wooded 10 acres with ferns on either side of the driveway, making it very nice. The adjoining wooded area on either side is a tall stand of cedar trees. It's very beautiful. This is the home. It's a 2,000 square foot, 2-story home. Real quality built home, built in 1989. The 2.5 car garage is a 1,300 square foot. Plus there's a little wood shop in the back, a 3/4 bathroom, and a wood shed inside and outside in the garage area. We will proceed to tour the outside of the property and then go inside. It's nicely landscaped. All of what you see here are rhododendrons and azaleas, which are beautiful colored plants during the year. They're evergreen. The rest of the year, you can see in the distance there's a beautiful apparently a cherry tree that's in bloom. There's a fenced orchard with about a dozen fruit trees. The framed area is blueberries. There are, as I recall, also seedless blackberries, and we will show you grapes in a minute. But here's the rest of the front area of the property. When Lloyd and Mary Margaret first bought this property, they had to whack their way in through the thick woods to get here. And then over the years, as they'd come up in the summers from working at PUC, they would clear this land and live in a tent. And then they would go on hiking expeditions and such, backpacking. Over the years, they built this cabin. The lumber was built from trees knocked down here on the property, and Lloyd cut up the lumber with a Alaska chainsaw sawmill. They lived in this two-room cabin when they would come up for the summers. It had a wood stove in the main room and a kitchen, and then they had a bedroom with a bathroom. And the bathroom even had a, because it was off-grid and no running water, they would haul water from a spring quite a distance away in a pail. And then they had a shower with a 5-gallon bucket with a rope and a pulley with holes in the bottom. They'd fill the warm water in the bucket and then lift the bucket and have a shower. The property has a nice orchard of about a dozen fruit trees of varieties and some grapes, and I understand seedless blackberries as well. These appear to be grapes. I recall they were Concord grapes, I believe, on this fence. In one corner of the orchard is a blueberry patch with about a half a dozen blueberry bushes matured. They're very productive. There's a frame around it with which allows for netting when the berries are ripe to keep the birds from taking them. Sauk Mountain is in the distance. And here's the rhododendrons and azaleas on the front back side of the house. And this is the south side of the house. You can see it's a 2-story house. Living room space is on the lower right, master bedroom on the lower left, and then great room space upstairs. There's an attached sunroom on either side of that door, in which Lloyd was starting seeds and raising orchids. And then the window on the left is a little wood shop in the back of the garage. You can see there's skylights above that sunroom. This little fenced area is what was their garden in their elderly years, but I understood from Lloyd that there had been a much larger garden over here in previous years. Lloyd Amy literally wrote the book on country living, and when they purchased this property, they were attempting to implement all of the principles that he had written about and taught about country living on this property. While Lloyd attempted to integrate as many sustainable elements to this property as he could, it isn't off-grid. You can see the power transformer for the underground power. That's the only aspect, in my opinion, on this property that could be enhanced, that's missing regarding being sustainably independent, is the aspect of having alternative energy, which could be added. But it already has a dozen fruit trees, it has blueberries, grapes, other kinds of berries. It's got a source of firewood in the woods on the property. It has a wood stove for heat. So from a sustainable country living perspective, in my opinion, this is an ideal place. If you took bare land and were going to develop your own country property, how long would it take to grow fruit trees to be productive? How long would it take to have garden space that would be productive and build a greenhouse and so forth? And this has everything except for the addition of some alternative energy which could be added.
So let's talk about how to search for country property. The only thing that wasn't on that property that I think would be needed is solar. They had a Honda generator that was wired to the house that when the power would go out, they could fire that thing up and they could run the house. So they had that, but from a really sustainable perspective, it would be good to have solar, and that could have been easily added to that property. Okay, how to search for country property. Now I'm going to show you, we've talked about what to look for a little bit, but now I'm going to show you how to look for it. And so this particular one shows that Amy house in the lower left corner. And you can go to just about any realty website and they will have an interactive map. And if the realty you're looking at doesn't have it, go to another realty because they all have multiple listings, so they all have the same houses. So this happens to be Windermere Realty, which I know is in Canada as well. And I picked this Amy house so that you could see an example of a house you've already seen. So on the left is a picture, and on the right, the red dot is the Amy house, and the other blue dots are other properties that are for sale. So my suggestion is that as far as what to look for, you need to consider who's involved. Like if you're by yourself, it's easy. You can just decide and do whatever you want. If you're married, then the two of you need to collaborate and come up with something that you agree on. If there's two families together, like in our case, it was our daughter and her husband and us two, and our goal was to be within about 5 miles from each other, and the Lord made it possible for us to each have 40 acres and be next door to each other. So it's close enough that we don't see them or hear them, but we can walk, and we just love it with our grandkids and everything. So when we were trying to figure out where to go, we were all in Arizona, and we said, okay, where are we going to go? And the reason I'm telling you this is that think about your situation and how many people are involved in the process. So we had 4 people. So we each made a list, and then we prioritized it. By the way, this process is something that I did with a couple friend of mine. If I was a pastor and I had a couple wanting to get married and I'm doing counseling, I would do this. I'm not a pastor and I haven't had this opportunity, but I did have the opportunity when one of our friends, young friends, was wanting to get married. And I told them about this process and asked them if they'd be willing to do it, and they did. And here's what I did. I said, okay, I want you to each make a list of what's important to you, 50 things. Separate, half an hour later, get back together. Okay, you got a list of 50 things? They're going, man, that was a lot of work. Now I want you to go back and prioritize them in order of priority with the most important on the top. Oh, okay. So they went and they did it and came back. And I said, now the trick is look at the top 5 things. If those top 5 things on both lists aren't very similar, you might reconsider whether you're compatible. Let me give you an example. The Sabbath is really important to me. It's non-negotiable. It's going to be on one of those top 5 things, right? If the partner doesn't see it that way, you are on a crash course, right? That's why the Bible says don't be unequally yoked with non-believers. Okay, so that, by the way, I ran into those people at camp meeting, and they've now been married for like 10 years, and they're happily married, and I'm going, yeah, cool. So the same process with looking for property. So in our case, there were 4 adults. So we each made a list of what we were looking for, and we put them in priority order, and then we tried to merge them. Because in this case, we need to merge them. We don't just need to, we're not looking about getting married. We're looking about buying some property. So we had to merge them. So the top thing, I think, for my daughter was to be within a reasonable distance of an Adventist school. The top priority for me was to be able to have a property with a creek that I could do some micro hydro and all that stuff I was talking to you about. The top priority for my wife was that we would not be in a place that's prone to have wildfires. So we were, and our son-in-law is an electrical engineer, and I don't remember his, but from my perspective, a top priority for him is what if he can't work remotely? What kind of electrical engineering jobs could he do without having to commute 2.5 hours each way? So anyway, so we made these lists and we found this property, and it actually has worked out really well. My son-in-law still works remotely, and so do my wife and I, and it's been great. Anyway, so that's important, that the stakeholders, as it's called in business, can agree on what's the priority, and so that you're compatible from the very beginning. Okay, so in this case, taking those examples, this property was within reasonable driving distance to a large Adventist school. We were on the west side of the mountains where it's not supposed to have the wildfires. They're all on the other side. The property actually does have 2 creeks coming downhill. Perfect. I'm going to be able to do micro hydro. As you know, I'm not able to do it, but the property has that capability. So anyway, then you can look on these. You've made your wish list. Then you say, what's the general geographic area I want to be? You're in Hawaii or Ohio, excuse me. You're in Ohio. You're in BC. You know, where do I want to land? And we were in Arizona. We said, well, let's look at Northern California, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Western Washington, British Columbia, because we're all dual citizens, even the grandkids. And so we ended up in Washington State. And so then where in the state? So then you look at your wish list again, and you kind of narrow down based on, you know, so we decided in this particular county, and then we're looking at, as we're driving around and looking at maps, where's the power lines? Where's the trains? Where's the hazardous kinds of things, like, say, a nuclear power plant, or things that we wouldn't want? And so that was our process. So now, when you find this property, like this Amy property, you can click on it, like here. You click on the red button, or you look at the map. It shows you what's on the map. The red one is this one on the lower left. So you click on it. Oops, I went the wrong way. Then you get the details. So you get pictures of inside the house, outside the house, the name of the realtor, happens to be an Adventist, and the details. And it doesn't say there Washington Corporation of Seventh-day Adventist is the beneficiary, but it was the case. Okay, so once you find a listing, you can then do a lot of research just on that site. It'll tell you the taxes. It'll tell you who owned it, when it bought, all kinds of things, all right? Now you can go, and here's some more of the details. It's single family home, territorial views, etc. And then more, you know, is it paved? Is it a dead-end street? And all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of information, kind of floor covering. And then you can go to the county in the states. I don't know, BC, it would be provincial, probably has the same thing. And it varies from county to county. But if any of you didn't get the handout, raise your hand. Kathy will give it to you. So I went to the county website. Kathy, we got one up here. Kathy, right here. So I went to the county website, and you'll notice at the top, you can search by address. Right here, Kathy. Address, parcel number, owner's last name, and road. And I don't know what XREF ID is, but anyway, but I knew Amy and I knew how to spell it. So I typed in Amy, and it popped up, and it said Amy, Lloyd, and Mary Margaret, Rev Trust. See, the trust is the Adventist Church part of it. Okay, and it gives the parcel number. So then you can get all kinds of details. It shows a picture. that the assessor made when he came around to do the taxes. It shows you the address. Now, here's something really important. Let's say you're driving around and you find a house that you like, and I'm not talking about for sale. Don't stop at a realty. Don't stop at a for sale sign. If you see a place that, if you've exhausted all the real estate listings, you're not finding what you like, don't stop there. Just drive around and go, boy, I like that. I wonder how much land that is. You look here on the county thing, it'll say, well, it's 12.5 acres. And then you look here, notice it says owner information and then site address. So here's where it said Seventh Day Adventist Church, right? But it also said P.O. Box, whatever. So here's the thing. If you look at a place, for sale or not, but let's say it's not for sale, and you're on the street, you're looking on your phone or laptop, and you go, I'm interested in that. I wonder if they'd like to sell it. If you walk up to the door and you knock on the door and say, hey, I'm interested in your house, would you like to sell it? What's the risk of doing that? You might not be talking to the owner. It might be a rental. And they're going to say no. And you're going to walk away and say, well, that's a bummer. I would have liked that place. You're talking to the wrong person. If you look at this county record, it'll tell you if it says the name of the person in the address and it's different than the address of the property, then the owner doesn't live there. And whoever's in the house is not the owner, and you don't want to talk to them at all. So that's a little thing to watch out for. And this is the legal description at the bottom. And then you can click down, it'll show you the fire district you're in and all kinds, whether it's a concrete foundation, what kind of siding, how many square feet, all kinds of information. And it'll show you the taxable value, 677. In this particular case, they were asking 740, okay? And that gives you the ability to say, are they asking a reasonable price or not? Because oftentimes the taxable value is a little bit less than the market value. Do you want to guess why? My opinion is the tax assessor is an elected office. They want to get reelected. And if everybody's mad at them because their taxes are too high because they're making their property value higher than they think it should be, then they're not going to get reelected. So oftentimes through history, this number here is, say, 20% less than what the actual selling price might be. Another thing you get off of this kind of thing is, and I guess I don't show it, but it'll show the history of it being sold. And you'll know that this place actually sold 20 years ago for $300,000. And now it's 700, and you can do some research and figure it out. In this case, Amy's owned it forever. Okay, another thing is you can go to Google Maps. Now, I use Google Maps when I'm traveling, tell me about traffic and all that stuff, but this is Google Maps showing the Amy house, okay? Now, it shows you where the roads are, it shows you nearby creeks and stuff like that, but it doesn't show you the terrain of the land, whether it's steep, whether there's trees, whether there's a concrete processing plant next door. So if you go to Google Earth, well, this is still Google Maps here, this shows the terrain. So you can tell whether it's fairly flat or not. These dark things are really steep banks and stuff, where the highway is and so forth. And this is the satellite image of that property. So now you can tell if there's a concrete processing plant next door, because you couldn't see it if you drive in because there's trees in the way. This way you can see what's really in the neighborhood. And that can be very beneficial to know what's really going on. So anyway, those are my suggestions for looking for country property. And Friday, we're going to do the spiritual part, preparation or presumption, finding physical balance with spiritual preparation. And again, don't miss tomorrow. I just had lunch with the lady that's going to tell her story tomorrow about how God gave her country property. They were Russian immigrants, came with their suitcases, and now they own country property that they didn't pay a dime for it.
To be aware of new videos like this one, be sure to subscribe to the Preparing for the Time of Trouble channel. For more free videos and downloadable audio podcasts, as well as handouts, go to
www.preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com. Topic categories include recordings of live seminar presentations, country living, sustainable gardening, homestead remedies, how to be self-sufficient when the grid goes down, wild edible and medicinal plants, hydrotherapy, and end-time Bible prophecies. To take advantage of these free resources, go to preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com.